everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of the Martial Arts Podcast. I am your host. My name is Adam Bachler. I'm a blogger, I'm an author, I'm a video uploader, and I'm a Zumba-er. I don't even know if that's the right word. More on that in a little bit. Most importantly, though, I am a martial artist. I created the Martial Arts Podcast for people like me who love martial arts. This podcast lets you get to know the person behind the uniform and the belt, or in today's case, the sash. Before we go any further, this podcast is supported by martial artists just like you, so rate, download, subscribe on iTunes or at adambachler.com. You can like the Martial Arts Podcast on Facebook. Hey, go over there. Let me know how I'm doing. Send me some questions that I can answer on the next show. Let me know if you have any great ideas for who you'd like to hear on one of the future episodes of the Martial Arts Podcast. This episode's guest is Sifu Dexter Parker. He's a 40-year veteran of the martial arts after he started in the 1970s, and he's a multiple-time inductee into the USA Martial Arts Hall of Fame. Today, Mr. Parker teaches at his Trinity Training Center in Peoria, Illinois, and if you remember from episode 3 of the Martial Arts Podcast, I had on Eddie Parker, and Dexter Parker is Eddie Parker's uncle. You can go back and listen to that episode to hear more about how Dexter trained Eddie, since he touches on it a little bit in this episode. Now, Dexter Parker and I have crossed paths a few times over the past couple of years. He's a good friend of Steve Aldous, who appeared on episode 2 of the Martial Arts Podcast. And to give you a little bit of background on Mr. Parker, Dexter Parker here, one of the causes that's really close to him is St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. The Trinity Training Center and Eddie Parker's School of Combative Arts host a martial arts demonstration and seminar each year for St. Jude. And this year I was happy to participate, as well as last year. Both times was a member of Steve Aldous' group doing a demonstration there. This year, actually, on August 2nd, I did my own half-hour session on DDP Yoga, which I was pretty happy about. Thanks to both the Parkers and to Don Knox for organizing that event this year. I'll be sure to let everybody know about next year's event and as well as how you can attend or donate. For now, you can see a few videos by searching for Metamora Martial Arts on YouTube. August was a busy month for me, man. The same day that I did that St. Jude demo, I went to go see Girls, 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 and they're an all-female Motley Crue cover band. And really, that has no relevance to this podcast, but I thought they were super badass, so go see them if you can. I spent the weekend after that demo in Las Vegas for a friend's bachelor party. And then the weekend after that, I was in Wisconsin for Brown's Karate Academy's Share the Martial Arts Camp. You can find more information about that at sharethemartialarts.com. But anyway, because of the busy schedule, that's why I'm putting this podcast out on the very last day of this month. But anyway, Share the Martial Arts was great. There were probably about 50 people there, and they were all so great to talk to. One of my goals is going to new seminars to meet new people and to build my network of quality martial artists. You guys have heard me talk a little bit about some of the ones I've been to in the past, including the Hall of Fame, including the Tai Campos Kali seminar that I was at in Moline. I had a great time working with the partners that Share the Martial Arts and talking to them about new ideas. I'm definitely interested in attending this weekend again, even if I was doing Zumba at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I've never done that before, but it was still pretty fun. Rebecca, the teacher in charge of that, had a real blast, and you could tell she was having a lot of fun with that. Honestly, though, I was a little bit horrified about sleeping in a cabin with probably about 10 kids, but that turned out great because they were asleep by the time I came to bed, and they were still asleep when I woke up in the morning. I don't know, maybe that just makes me an old man, but I don't know. Either way, the best thing that I got out of that camp was that it's forced me to reassess my priorities in the martial arts, and that's about all I'll say on that for right now. But it was very therapeutic for me in a sense. You can find some videos from Share the Martial Arts online, once again, at youtube.com/Metamora Martial Arts. You know, speaking of priorities, Mr. Parker and I got to talking after I turned off the microphone. He said toward the end of the recording that Kung Fu has some answers for who you are, what you are, and why you are. And we talked about those for probably about another half hour after we stopped recording. There's definitely another conversation that needs to happen between us on the record. But hey, that's for another time. Today, we've got another conversation lined up for you. Here it is.
Now, the style that I teach right now, I teach Hung Gar, which is not the style I started with. I started with a style called Kung Tao, and it's the way my instructor pronounces it, it's Kung Tao and Silat. Sometime back, they were only just saying Indonesian, combat arts. They weren't really wanting to say Silat for some reason. As a matter of fact, when I started training in it, we didn't know what it was called, except it was Chinese, but it wasn't just Chinese, but that was the main focus of it. But I actually started the martial arts when I think I was like 16 or 17, and I started with judo. A buddy of mine was taking some free classes, and because we were all real poor, so we couldn't really get into a regular school and study because we didn't have the money. But he took some, they give away free classes, so he took some of those. He came back and was showing me, and then I because I hadn't went, I got to go to a free class, and we did that. Then I think the next thing was a little bit of karate, and then I got into taekwondo. I stayed in that a little bit, and then I got out of that because it wasn't. The guy was it was a group called the Choi Brothers. I don't know if you're familiar.
I feel like I've heard of the Choi Brothers.
I believe they're in California now, but they came over from Korea like Soo Kim did, but Soo Kim had probably already been here 20 years, and but they came and they were saying they had advertisements saying that they taught Bruce Lee style and stuff like that. And
now, what years are we in right here?
We're talking. Let me go. At that time, we're talking the 70s.
Okay.
With the Taekwondo. Let's see. Then after that, well, one of the reasons I quit that is because the instructor. I was really big into bodybuilding and stuff, and so I was huge. And the guy said, "You're going to go for your yellow belt this weekend at a tournament." Which I didn't really want to do tournaments. That wasn't why I took it, But anyway, and then I said, well, you mean I'm going to have to fight or spar, And he goes, yeah, it's, point sparring. I didn't even know what that was. But he says, you're going to go for that. And he goes, don't worry, you won't have to fight. I said, why not? He said, they're going to take one look at you and go, I'm not fighting that guy. And I was like, nah. That's not what I want, so I quit, Then it was sometime later I met my first Kung Fu instructor. His name was Amin Shamsuddin. By this time it was in the 80s. It was around, 81, 82 maybe. That's when I met him. Met him at Caterpillar. We were both working there. And this was funny. We were... he was another black guy, and we got on the conversation of Bruce Lee, and he didn't like Bruce Lee. That really made me go, what?
What didn't he like about him?
He thought he wasn't a real fighter. He thought he was just what did he say? He was like a strategist who came up with ideas but really couldn't fight. And I was like, well, he evidently hadn't read much about Bruce Lee's life, But anyway, he got my attention when he said that. I said, why? I asked him why, and he said, I don't think I think he's just an actor. I said, wow. But anyway, he says, have you ever seen real Kung Fu? I go, yeah, Bruce Lee. And he goes, no, I mean really in real life. I go, no. And I said, as far as I know, there weren't any schools around here. I didn't even know about Master Aldous. I don't even know if he was here at the time. I'm sure he probably was. But I said no. And so at lunch, he showed me this form from the Kung Tao, but he wouldn't tell me. He just said it was Kung Fu. Actually, he used the term Gung Fu, which is just a northern term, because when you say Kung Fu, in Kung Tao, it's Gung Fu is the northern and Kung Fu is the southern. Okay. And if you use the Kung Fu term, you're referring to the hard aspects. And if you use, the Gung Fu is actually Mandarin, but that is this softer side of at least that's what my instructor says. And I read stuff, and some of it's a little bit different, depending on the region and what you're talking about. But I'm going, well, this is what he says about his system, so I'm not gonna knock that.
Right.
But anyway, I met this guy and saw that he showed me this form at lunch. He says, "You want to see more? Come on down to the school." Well, that was a good sell point because after I saw it, I was like, "That's what I was looking for." The way they moved, the flow. So I went and I was hooked from that time on. That was around the 80s, early 80s.
Okay.
And then around 83, 84, the school shut down. Amin was originally from Buffalo, New York. He was also a Muslim, and actually tried to get a lot of the students to, go with that belief. But we were kind of like, I don't know what that is. He gave me these two books. I guess they were the Quran. So I had read the Bible before, and so I was looking through these just because, he gave them to him, and I thought, well, I might as well at least look at them.
Oh, yeah.
So I looked at them, and they all of them, both books seem like a larger version of Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, where it has a lot of wisdom that's quoted in there, know. And that's what those seem like to me, but I wasn't really interested in that. So
you're probably just like, dude, I just want the martial arts.
Well, actually, I wasn't the only one because he asked the class one time, and we all kind of like, well, we don't really want to do that. And he just dropped it. He never said anything else about it after that. So, but that's where everything started. And, as time went on, when the school closed, there was one advanced student by the name of Sylvester Hunter that a lot of us went and started training with him because he was the only one left. Went back to New York, and we haven't heard from him since. Even with the internet, people have been trying to find him, and we just can't seem to locate him. He was actually he had met a student at Bradley who lived in Cleveland, Ohio, because that's where my instructor's from. Now, Amin he opened the school here, and it was just a branch of the Cleveland school. But he was under a master named Greg Mayo, who's a grandmaster now. But he basically was his student. Well, then Grandmaster Reginald McKissick, who was just a Sifu at the time that I met him, he came down because Arthur Seitz, who is the founder of I think it was called the North American School of Kung Fu, and that's where those guys went when they went up there. But Arthur Seitz would assign different instructors to new students. And these guys were from out of town. They would go up, I think, every 3 months. They would travel from Peoria and go up there to train.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. And then we didn't get to do that because Reggie came here for about 6 months. Reggie McKissick, that's who my instructor, the Grandmaster, is now. Now Arthur Seitz and the founder of, well, I shouldn't say he's not the founder, but he was the next guy in line to get the Kung Tao system. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Wheelam Readers. Okay, that's his English name. His Chinese name he was named after his great uncle, Lu Shan. Now there was the senior who was a priest in the Shaolin Temple. The story goes is that Lu Shan's, I think it was his grandmother, eloped with a Dutch prince, and she was a Chinese princess. Well, this Dutch prince asked for her hand in marriage, and they just laughed at the guy and said, no way, So they eloped, left China, and Lu Shan's great uncle was given the task to go and bring her back. And she refused. And he was like, well, this is what I heard. Okay, there's two stories I heard. So this one I'm telling you now probably no way to prove that. But he did go. She refused, so he stayed because he said if he went back, he wouldn't be able to come back. But the other story that is in print now is that in China, Lu Shan's great uncle, who was Lu Shan Senior, And that's the way they do that. They don't say great uncle or grandfather.
So it's senior?
It's senior, yeah. And so he actually got in a fight with 5 kung fu martial artists. One of them threw glass in his eyes, and it blinded him. Mm-hmm. But he killed all 5 of those guys. And
without sight? Without
sight. This is the guy that was the priest. And so he basically moved with, this is the second story, he moved with his niece, and the niece eventually had a daughter. The daughter had Lushan, or Wheelam Readers. And so since he couldn't go back to China because he feared he was older and he was going to be killed, so he stayed in Indonesia, and because that's where they went. And the Dutch prince and the princess, the Chinese princess, that's where they went. And so he went there to live with them. And in turn for letting him live with him, he trained Lushan, I guess you would say junior.
Yeah.
The best way to keep from getting confused is to say Wheelam Readers, because he was half Dutch and half Chinese. Well, his great uncle took him to the Shaolin Temple when he was like 9, and they did that for 10 years. So he could get in there and get back, and that's how he was given it's called the Royal Lushan Gung Fu system, and it's the Kung Tao that they talk about there is not the same as when you see Kung Tao Silat. You'll see a lot of that, and actually in that system there's like a higher level only taught to the firstborn. It's only supposed to be handed down from father to son. Even if he has 10 sons, only the first one gets it. And
even if like his ability isn't that great, and
well, see, I'm sure they would make some type of allotment in case that happened. But usually it was always passed down like that. And so his great uncle decided, that since he couldn't go back to China, he didn't have a son. So he decided to teach Wheelam. Mm-hmm. So that's how Wheelam got it. Wheelam wasn't the traditional type as far as who he was going to teach. And he eventually did have a son. I think he married 3 different times. He outlived all but one wife.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's a pretty healthy guy. But he did have a son that actually I think maybe 2 sons. Some kind of aren't sure about the second one. And so that son got handed But Wheelam was not going to just keep it at that. He thought that was too rigid of a custom. So he started training anyone that really wanted to train with him. So he got past the idea of just only training the firstborn son and only Asians. Actually they really wouldn't. You would get the second lower level type Kung Tao. You wouldn't get the royal. Mm-hmm. But Lushan trained. Well, they really don't know how many people he trained in that style, but he stopped teaching it and said that enough people know it now that it'll survive if something happens to me.
Yeah.
And so he went on and started. Because he was in Indonesia, he trained with Silat experts, and there was one guy, the Tauruses. Are you familiar with them?
Mm-mm. I don't know a whole lot about like Silat and Hungar and stuff.
Well, actually, the Chinese had migrated to Indonesia, and when they went there, they didn't want to call their art kung fu because they weren't in China. They thought that should have only been reserved for the Chinese culture as far as the title. So they called it Kung Tao. This Kung Tao just means Chinese. It's another way of saying Chinese way. Okay, and you'll hear the term Chinese hands, Indonesian feet, and really when they're talking about the hands, that's not really what they mean. It really refers to body alignment. Mm-hmm. Okay, and what they like, the reason they added the Sea-Lot footwork is because some of the footwork was very, very quick, a lot quicker than a lot of your kung fu traditional styles. Like if you were looking at Wing Chun or even Hung Gar. Hung Gar has, by itself, is considered a hard style in the Chinese systems. They kind of compare it more to a karate system. Mm-hmm. Okay, so some do, some don't, but there's a lot more to Hung Gar than most people. What it's mostly known for is the tiger and crane set. Okay, well, a lot of times in China, if you say I train in Hung Gar, and they'll say, "Oh, tiger and crane." That's what they look at it as that, mm-hmm. and it's a lot more than that because
are there more animals involved?
Yeah, there are. I mean, you have the tiger and the crane, which really balances out the theory of yin and yang. But so you also have the crane, the snake, and the leopard. And if you were comparing the leopard and the tiger, you would say, okay, what's the difference? These are both cats, big cats in terms of a man. Mm-hmm. But the tiger is a lot bigger than the leopard. So what you get from the leopard is that what's just different from the tiger is that the leopard is not going to confront you head on. The tiger will, has no fear. Okay, so it's all force when you let go. I mean, when he leaps, there's no turning back. For instance, you could shoot a tiger, if you could shoot him in the head, mm-hmm. Once he leaps, even though you hit him in the head, that momentum doesn't stop. He doesn't just drop. That momentum is going to carry forward. If you have a big enough gun, I guess you could blow him apart. But if you could just, if you were a marksman and you hit him right in the brain, basically he would instantly die. Mm-hmm. But that momentum, that power that he used to push forward, it's like a car at 80 miles an hour. You hit the brakes, it doesn't stop. Yeah. It has to slow down. Yep. Unless it hits something that it just folds it up. You know what I mean, like a brick wall or something. But but the leopard will use glancing blows, and they're super fast. The leopard will hit you with multiple strikes, but none that he basically wants to wear you down, circle you. Mm-hmm. The tiger's going to come in and just rip you apart because you can't stop him.
Sounds like the leopard's just going to play with you a little bit. Really.
Well, it uses its agility and its speed to fight you. It doesn't use its strength to take you out. Okay, where the tiger would. Now the crane, this is why the tiger and crane are a perfect match. The crane possesses no strength as far as muscle, mm-hmm. okay, and brute force. So what it does is when you're learning this style, you offset your power with this softness, okay? And like one of the sets I teach is the 2-man tiger and crane set. It's where two guys are playing out this role of movements. One is the tiger and one is the crane. And then as you move along, you're switching, both practitioners switch back and forth. If I come at you with a tiger strike, your partner is going to counter that with a crane. And what it does, it uses softness not to stop your strike, but just to move it over mm-hmm. and then make an opening so that it could strike.
Yeah. And it sounds like with the lack of muscle, a crane would need to be precise.
Oh, yeah. And a true crane practitioner would not move until he had to move. Doesn't second guess. Doesn't hesitate. Mm-hmm. But the deception is he doesn't buy into all the movement. Just wait on you and just watch it. And then it'll only move what it needs to move to take you out. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a neat system to learn, And actually, Hung Gar was the ones that system came up with the tiger and crane. In the beginning, Hung Gar was primarily tiger. And crane was added a little while later, not too far down the line. But then they started adding other stuff like the leopard, mm-hmm. The snake. The snake has different attributes than like even the crane, But then there's also the dragon, which is focusing more on internal power, internal striking. So when they strike, they're going to strike at nerves. The crane does a little bit of that, so does the snake. Where the tiger and the leopard basically are going to, the tiger's just going to break you in two. Mm-hmm. It's going to use all its power on you. It would only take one strike from the tiger to end you. The leopard, maybe about, depending on who you are and what it is you're trying to do, the leopard might use 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6. But he's always coming in on angles where the tiger just comes brute force right at you. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really, it just like sees you and whack. That's it. The leopard's kind of like moving around, maneuvering, trying to bait you. You ever watch 2 cats go at it, or a cat go at it with a dog? Mm-mm. Here's a dog, bigger animal, but he's going to use his teeth to get that cat. But that cat uses those claws. Yeah. And when that dog puts his nose out there, he gets it, and then he goes back and like, I don't want no more of that. And they can get it in the eye and all that, and the cat's a lot faster. Yeah. It just depends if the dog could catch him off balance or something, because it even happens in nature. You see where an animal makes a mistake, with instinct, and then they pay for it. But so you have those 5 animals are basically what you have in Hung Gar. Now, in Kung Tao, it goes all the way up to 12. So it's a little bit different. Yeah. Yeah. But it still has those 5, and it adds the other to make out 12.
What are some of the other animals that Kung Tao has?
In Kung Tao, you have the monkey. You have, they have the bear, which is in some ways similar to the tiger, but in a different way. Mm-hmm. Monkey is one of the major ones they use a lot in that system, because they do a lot of rolling on the ground. You come at them, and if you're trying to get them, they'll roll around and climb right up on you and hang on to you like a monkey would, and then just whack you. It also kind of looks like in the system I learned, the monkey is very fluid. It doesn't, even though it can jump around and be kind of erratic in its movements. You ever see like a chimpanzee when they're moving around? They can come straight at you, and all of a sudden they can just go off this way and then right back. And of course, they're really, really strong. Mm-hmm. But then you have the parts of the crane in there. Also, the praying mantis, they have some of that. And so you kind of wonder, like, why did they put all these different animals in there? They have the eagle, where you see the eagle claw, mm-hmm. And so I mean, it has a lot of stuff about the same thing. Yeah, pretty much fits a lot more body types than Hung Gar probably would, But a lot of the things are similar, though. I was talking to my instructor one time. I asked him about Hung Gar because when the school closed, I still didn't know the name of the system. It was they didn't tell anybody. And now it's out there everywhere.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there's a commercial benefit to it, and people want to be known.
Well, I asked my instructor why at that time they didn't tell you what it was. He said, well, because so many people would start and then quit. So at some point they decided not to tell them what it was. So that if they went over and said, well, I studied this. I've had people do that said, hey, I studied under Dexter Parker, and I go, I don't really remember them. And I said, they might have came for one class. Yeah. I go, that's not studying, they just got a free class because I offer a couple free classes to try it out, and then you don't, if you don't see them again, you don't see them again. Yeah. But they said they had a lot of that, and people claiming to have advanced really far, and they go like, no, you don't know who that is. Mm-hmm. And so, now one of the things too was that the 2 guys that Lucian are Wheelam Readers, and Arthur Seitz both of those guys were, well, Arthur Sykes was the founding father of the North American School of Kung Fu, but he was the highest ranking non-Asian in that Lu Shan promoted. And so I think that was like a 4th degree red sash. Actually, it's blood red. And I like, what is it called? Or blood red or rose red? I said, well, why is it called that? He said, well, you know how when you tie the bow, the sash, it has this big bow. Mm-hmm. It looks like a flower. It looks kind of strange, but you look at that, and when Reggie was at the school back almost 30 years ago now, his wasn't tied like that, so I'm not sure if they even had that in mind at the time. A lot of things changed from what I was taught to what they teach right now. They've made some changes in some things. And so, like, some of the techniques were changed, too, because we used to do this one basic one, and Reggie was going over that with me. He says, because when you what we're trying to do right now is have my school and what he's doing on the same page, and make sure there's no variances and stuff, because that happens a lot. Mm-hmm. And so he said, the first basic technique, he showed me that. And I said, but the one you showed me has a punch to the ribs. He goes, yeah. He goes, I added that. He goes, that wasn't originally part of it. I said, oh, okay. So I said, so that was okay? He goes, yeah. He goes, you're going to do the same thing? I go, yeah. Actually, I already have. Because there's like a 30-year gap between us. Mm-hmm. When the school closed, Reggie went back to Cleveland, and I didn't see him for 30 years. So what I did was I took what I had and I just worked it. I mean, he even told me, he says, if you work with this, he goes, you're going to figure out a lot of it, because what we start you out with, he goes, there's no hiding anything. This is why we don't tell you the name. But what you're learning, well, anytime I had an altercation with somebody and I had to defend myself, it always worked. Mm-hmm. Not once did it not work. So I was like, there's a lot more to this than what they told me. But I had did some demos and sent those to Reggie when I connected back up with him, and he was watching that, and he told me he was here last October. We did a little thing here, and he put a little bit of it on his website. I think it's even on YouTube. I
think I did see that. The thing
with the triangle. He's explaining the northern and southern triangle.
Yep.
And, there's a lot more that he only went.
Oh, I'm sure that was a 3-minute video.
Yeah, that was really short. And we spent 4.5 hours down here. Huh. So that was great. But he says, he goes, I know you're thinking that because you have this gap here that you don't know a lot of stuff. He goes, you may not know what something is called. He says, but you know the movements because you figured it out. I go, what a way to teach a system. So basically right now what we're doing is he's giving me all the information on actually what I already know. Mm-hmm. He just promoted me to first degree orange. That takes 20 years just on a regular time basis, But he says when I come back, I'm going to promote you to third. We're going to even just skip. He says you really probably should be. I can't rank you where I'm at, but but he says you're like this close to that. So,
congratulations.
So I was like, wow, that's good. But he says, how many guys keep it up after the school closes and you can't contact anybody? So it was. I just was determined to keep going. I could see the value in what I had. I wasn't planning on teaching. That was the farthest thing from my mind.
Well, I do want to ask you about that, but I want to ask you real quick to clarify. So would the lineage be you and then Reggie and then the younger version of Lu Shan, or how does that work?
Oh, it starts with the lineage, and I'm going to put that on my website.
Okay.
And I'm going to put it on a bulletin board here. It starts with Lu Shan Sr., which is actually the great uncle.
Right.
And then it would be Wheelam Readers. Then it would be Arthur Sykes. Now, Arthur Sykes, he's the one that trained Reggie. But Reggie was so exceptional that he earned the right to. He actually trained with Lucian for a year, went and lived with him for one whole year, and then he came back to Cleveland. And that's so Arthur Seitz sent Reggie here to Peoria to help out this branch. And Reggie says, when I was sent down here by Arthur Seitz, he goes, you were my first student that I promoted. It takes 6 months to 2 years to get a white sash in that system.
Otherwise, you just have nothing.
You don't have anything. You don't have anything. It is actually, it's a real test of character for a person to go that long. But Reggie came. He would come back and forth, But this about the third or fourth time he came, he stayed about 6 months, and he came in one day and says, "You're testing." I was like, "It's out of the blue." And I was like, wow. So I tested and passed. And he said, do you know you are the first in the history of our schools to get your white sash as soon as you did? I said, well, I couldn't remember how much time it was. He said, yeah, it was like 5 months. He said, usually it's 6 months to 2 years. Well, we would have people come in from time to time that wanted to challenge the instructor. Well, they always had to start with the white sashes. But it was embarrassing a lot of times. Those white sashes would I was waiting for my turn, but there was a guy 2 or 3 months ahead of me. He said, you spar him first. And then you got to spar the next guy and then all the way up before you can get to me. You just don't get to come in and do that. That's not our custom, But the lineage would be Arthur Seitz, Reginald McKissick, and then me.
Okay.
And then I have Ed and a guy named, a student named, I can't remember his name right now, but he's in the Navy, and he's making a career of it. But real good guy. He's off still doing what I taught him.
Nice.
So that's really nice to see that. And then Ed, of course, being, having his own school and carrying it on, which is what after a point, that's what you really live for after that. You want your art to carry on. You don't really care about what happens to you at that point, because you're right where, you need to pass it on or it's not going to get passed on, So I'm really proud of him and all the things. He jokes around a lot, but he's a really good guy. And he's a good martial artist.
Yeah.
He had some hard training.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit because, you were saying that you didn't envision yourself as a teacher. And
I didn't. I didn't do – at first, I really didn't think about that. And they used to always – he'll probably tell you, every time I saw Uncle, he was training. And that was true. I was always training. I'd work, and then I'd train. And so a lot of times he would come over, him and my other nephew and my younger brother – bug me. They would just bug me about, well, show me. I go, nah. Well, Ed was like 5, so I didn't take him serious. He's not gonna keep up with this. Anyway, one day they kept bugging me, so I said, okay, I tell you what, do a horse stance. So I taught him a horse stance, and I said, now I want to see you do that. And I knew that if anything was going to turn them off, this would turn them off, and they would leave me alone. That's how it started out. But it didn't turn them off. They wanted to do it. And so I would just make them go longer, and I wouldn't show them anything but a horse stance at first. And then finally I got to looking at them thinking, they're serious. I'm going to have to do something here. So I would have, every time they'd come over, we would spend time training, and then eventually they got big enough to where they could spar. Him and Ed and Carnell, we call him Corn. He's Ed's cousin. I think he's like maybe 2 years younger than Ed.
Okay.
And so, but they would spar all the time, and they started getting pretty good. So then I figured I better really start showing them something and teaching them the art itself instead of just these little techniques and the sparring stuff. Mm-hmm. So I asked them if they would really, I said, I know you guys are telling me you want to do this, but look, I'm serious. Do you really want to learn any more than what I've shown you? And yeah. and I'm looking at them, kind of trying to, read all of that, whether they're really real or not. And they were showing it by their actions, but they were pretty young. Ed was 5, Carnell was maybe 3 or 4, something like that. He was little, so I was thinking he really won't keep with it, but they did. They did for a long time. Then as Ed got into high school, he started bringing his buddies around, and I wound up on the weekends just teaching I wasn't charging anything. I just taught a bunch of his friends and stuff, and finally I wound up with a school, mostly in the garage and basement sort of thing, and that grew and grew until we wound up here.
Yeah.
Because I got too crowded there. Had a little bitty basement. It wasn't even big as this section here, and we had 20, 25 people in there.
Oh my
gosh! Oh, man, we got to go somewhere else, and so that's what happened. We wound up here, and it's been going ever since.
Now, tell me a little bit about the training methodologies you used.
The training, one of the reasons I trained Ed the way I did and Carnell is because, Ed was real gullible when he was a kid. You know what I mean? People would tell him stuff, and he would believe it. Even when they're joking with him, he didn't realize they were joking. Things like that. And plus, he had this wild imagination, and he talked constantly.
No, I don't believe
blah,
that.
Blah, 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 blah. And I said, wait a minute. He goes, what? I said, what did you just say? He couldn't remember because he just had this dialogue going, and it would just come out of his mouth. And Carnell would watch him sometimes and says, don't you ever think about what you say? This is true stuff. He'll just laugh at you now about it. But, I mean, you can see why he's a comedian.
Oh yeah,
he's perfect for that.
Yeah.
But at the time, we didn't have any idea we thought he was just a little strange, And so I figured, I better train him because he's going to get himself in trouble with his mouth. He's going to say stuff that he can't back up, and then there was a few times when he did have to use it, but he didn't really wind up having to really hurt somebody. He never got in trouble for it. But the training was based on the training that I got, and it was, man, we would have people come in every week checking the school out, and they would try to do some of the training, and they couldn't hang, and they wouldn't come back. We would start out with 400 or 500 jumping jacks, and then we would do all these drills. I mean, horse stances for an hour, and you couldn't stop. You had to keep going. Then we'd run 4 or 5 miles, come back and do techniques and do forms. We did that for 3 hours on Saturday. And then it was an hour and a half class. I went 6 days a week. The only day I didn't go was Sunday. When I was on third, I went twice. I went in the morning right after work, and then I would before I'd go back to work, I'd go to class. And I got burnt out after a while, though. I was at work one evening, and I was at this little counter. It was about like this, and I was keeping track of these parts that go by. I had to log them and stuff, and I was standing there waiting for them to come down, and I went to sleep. I mean, actually, I was still holding the pen, and I had my hand here on this table or counter, and went to sleep. My boss come by and did this. I jumped and went, oh, man. And he says, you got to do that, go in the bathroom. Don't be doing that right out here. I was like, wow, I can't believe I didn't even move. I was like, you'd think you'd fall over or something or nod over. But I didn't do that. I just stood there looking down at this paper. My head was down and my eyes were closed. So that's when I realized I got to back off a little bit. So I just started only going in the evening. And but the training was, man, we did stuff like we went to the park and we would palm strike a tree, and we had to pull the bark off, and just keep doing that till we stuff like that. And then we had that what was supposed to be the iron palm training. We would stick our hands in hot water, and then we would stick them in these lima beans. We just thrust them in there. You had to pull up a handful but you couldn't drop any of them. There was a penalty for dropping them.
Wow.
I mean, you had to hold them. You could let them go like that once you were done, but we would put them in this. There was something in the, never did find out, and I just never did research why we had to do that specific training, but there was something in the lima beans. I don't know if he put something in there. Usually it was a herb so that it wouldn't damage your hands, because you could get nerve damage from doing all that stuff, you know. It's to toughen up your hands so that they would have a lot of callus. So externally they would be real tough, but the herbs were to keep you from having nerve damage, because you would damage the nerves banging on something like that. We had this big log. It was about this wide or long, and it was about that big around, and we would take that thing, and two guys would face each other in bow and arrow stances with your chest facing forward. You'd hold this thing here, and then you'd have to roll it off your arms, and the other guy had to catch it and let it roll down and hit here. It would hit you in the chest. The first time I did it, it knocked me into the wall and knocked me down. I wasn't really sure what. I just seen it coming, so I tried to, and then I tried to catch it, and it came and landed on my forearms like this. Oh, man. But that didn't last very long because it threw me into the wall, the force of it. But you know, after that, I braced myself for it, and that didn't happen again. But it was like, what a shock!
Yeah.
But we had that kind of training, and lots of stance training. They did that like you wouldn't believe. It was a vital part of the training. I mean, and that's what I trained Ed and them in, the same stuff. So as time went on, though, like I don't do that now because I did it a few times with a few of the students. Like this Chris Kenny was the guy I was trying to remember that's in the Navy. He went through it. Ed went through it. Carnell, a few others. Not many. The rest of them would quit.
Now, did they have to show you like a certain attitude before you would show them that type of training?
Yeah. I had to make sure they were going to stick with it. They also had to be conditioned to do. You'd start out with low-level stuff and then move up. Mm-hmm. You know, like, for instance, the horse stances, not just the horse stance, but all the stances that we did, you would, like we would do, my instructor would climb on your back when you were in a bow stance, and then you had to walk with him and stay in the bow stance. You couldn't come straight up. Mm-hmm. You had to walk in it with him on your shoulders. One of the things we do, too, is you'll get into bow stance, and he'll climb up on your back leg. The goal of that was to never get in that stance and be lazy. You know what I mean? Because you see students do it, and I'll come by and I'll touch that back part, the calf, and if it moves, they're not concentrated enough, or they're not. And then that also taught you the root, and I'm sure you understand the theory of rooting in your stance work, especially the horse, the bow. Now, when you're looking at the cat or reverse bow or twisting leg, it's a little different because those are mobile. In our system, those are mobile stances. You're not going to stay in those long. Those are very brief. You know, a lot of the leopard strikes are done from the cat, which fits it pretty well since you're doing cat strikes. But then there was all kinds of isometric exercises we did. We did those a lot, and my instructor's philosophy was we're learning to be able to fight 1,000 men. And we would look at him. He'd say that. We'd look like 1,000. You know, you couldn't imagine trying to fight 1,000 guys. But we were training like it. And it was hard. A lot of guys would quit, but I was like, and the guys that stayed with it, we just was determined. You know, when I first saw them, when I went to the school the first time and watched them do a full set, I was like, oh, yeah. I might as well lock the door. I'm not going anywhere.
Now, what had drawn you to it? Like, I mean, was there something as a kid that you're
as a kid, believe it or not, one of my favorite shows was Kung Fu the series. Even though, you know, you had David Carradine doing it, I didn't know much about him or anything, but there were real Chinese in there doing forms. And I liked the philosophy of the show. And the other one, actually, probably before Kung Fu, was The Green Hornet, where you had Bruce Lee playing Kato. And that that I was like, man, I wish I could do that, but there was nothing like that around here that I knew of at that time, and at the age, I think I was like maybe 12 when that was on. That was in the 60s. Yeah, there's some kids over there.
That's all right.
But anyway, so that's really what drew me to that. And plus, I grew up in the Taft homes back in the 60s and part of the 70s. Very violent place. It was, I was just talking to a guy today about that, and one time the Black Panthers were down there. There was an altercation with one relative of this group, and man, they called in the National Guard, the FBI. They made a mandatory curfew. They said right now there's a curfew. They just established it right at that moment, and they let all these German shepherds out and chased people to their houses.
Wow.
It was crazy. And then I think I think I was probably 12 or 11 or 12. I got in a fight with like 10 guys. It's just something that it kind of just escalated. One guy threw an egg and hit me in the head, and he was standing behind two guys laughing. I didn't know martial arts at the time, but I had watched Green Hornet, and I think I was an adult when Kung Fu came on, but I was a teenager when the Green Hornet was on. But this guy was laughing, and I remember I just pushed these two guys aside and went bang! I hit this guy with my fist. He fell down. I jumped on him and just started pounding that guy, and then all of a sudden I was getting kicked and punched, and I came up just hitting guys. I didn't even know martial arts, but after that I felt like I had lost control, and then I knew enough about the martial arts that it would give you that control, and that was probably one of the things that drew me to that after having that. Of course, I never got any more fights after that. Nobody wanted to mess with me. They didn't bother me no more after that fight.
Yeah.
I guess I had kind of gained a reputation, but that wasn't fun at all. I really didn't want to fight. You know what I mean? And so, but I always it seemed like I was drawn to like Bruce Lee. And so when he started making those movies, I bought everything that you could get a hold of about Bruce Lee, And so you could probably say he was one of my idols at that time, And I really did like Kung Fu. I thought it was pretty good. At that time, I really wasn't into who the actor was, and I was just watching him move. I liked that flow. Mm-hmm. And I think at that time he was kind of considered like a dancer because he didn't really know Kung Fu. But they had a Chinese master there that I think what we call it now, they choreography. They call it theatrical martial arts. Mm-hmm. You have these people now, but back then you didn't have that title. Yeah. But they had a guy who was the director of all the fight scenes and stuff, and they based everything that they did on his recommendation. I can't remember who that was, but.
I'm sure it's on some Wikipedia article somewhere.
Oh, yeah. And, here's another interesting thing. Lou Shawn, or Wheelam Readers, was they consulted him for the Shaolin Temple scenes. And actually, Kwai Chang Caine was Lou Shawn. And Master Po was the great uncle, Lou Shawn. The guy that was blind. They basically kind of patterned those characters after him. And do you know that Bruce Lee was the one that came up with that idea for Kung Fu? Mm-mm. Yeah. After the Green Hornet was canceled, he and the director of the Green Hornet came up with this. They both wanted to do another series, but it would be more. It was about the Old West and a guy doing Kung Fu.
In the Old West.
Yeah. And that was Bruce Lee's idea, but he submitted it to the studio. They liked it, but they said we can't have a Chinese play it. So they said, anyway, isn't this character supposed to be a half breed? But Bruce Lee goes, yeah, but I can play that, But they said no. And so David Carradine was chosen to play it. Yeah. But Bruce Lee spent time with Lucian. I asked my instructor about that. I said, is that just a rumor or is that real? And he goes, no, it was true. After that time, Bruce Lee came up with Jeet Kune Do, which was a combination of different styles.
Right.
And the Kung Tao that we have, it's changed a little bit, but it's a mixture of a little bit of. There are like 7 internal styles that are part of it, which is the soft, and then there you have this hard side. And in the soft side, you have Qi Kung, you have Tai Chi, you have Bakwa, you have Singing. These are all in there. But what portions of it that's supposed to be still a kind of a secret. But for the guy who knows what to look for, you can see it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, But so that's pretty much the gist of all that.
So what types of things are you teaching now?
I teach I teach Hung Gar, and the reason when the school closed, I was looking for some way to continue training in it and getting more knowledge, but there was none available. So one of the guys I trained with was saying, he said that which was the guy who started the Peoria school, said that Hung Gar, it's called Hung Gar. And I was like, Hung Gar? So I started researching Hung Gar. At that time, all you could get was magazines and books and videotapes, the VHS stuff. I started looking at that stuff, and I was like, that's not what we do. But I said, there's a lot of similarities. So I started training in that too. But the Kung Tao was, to me, a more aggressive system, a more spontaneous. There's a spontaneity in when you strike, man. It's like that person that you're striking. Well, once they strike, they don't get anything else. For instance, when he was explaining the triangle, a guy punches, you give him that inch. But then that's letting him step in the triangle. But if you're in the triangle, he doesn't even get to move. He actually is about to move, and you just cancel that. You cancel that movement. He doesn't get to do anything. There's no countering it. So if the guy doesn't really pay attention to what you're doing, he's like done. So but what happens is there's this explosive movement. There's the alignment puts your body in a position where the laws of physics, or you can see it working there. You actually turn on a 45 as you're striking. The guy's coming right at it. He starts to step, and he doesn't even get to. It's like he's thinking to move, and he doesn't get to finish it. He does, the jar to your brain is like everything just shut off. Like, what just happened? You're not dead, but you're like, if that didn't warrant you to stop or back off, then the next one you're down.
Yeah.
So I mean that's the difference between that and Hung Gar. Basically allows you to build this what we call the bridge, and you basically would counter from that. You want that contact, and you would build off of that. But the guy does have a chance to counter if he's paying attention. If he's not, then the same scenario is going to happen. So, but I teach, I'm teaching kids. I have a regular kids class. I teach them more about self-defense. It's more of the self-defense side instead of the combative side, because you don't really want them going out there kicking and punching people if they're like, I really specialize in the bullying stuff. So that's what I'm doing with kids right now. And I have a program called I'm Not a Target. And it teaches them what to look for. And if the same guy's picking on you, now think about it. If he picked on you yesterday, he's probably going to pick on you today. at some point you need to realize, like, you can see that coming, and the kids are kind of like, they never think about that, they're too busy playing or talking to their friends. And I said, well, if you don't want to keep getting beat up, you need to start paying attention. When does this guy do this? Does he do it the same time every time, or just when he sees you, or what? And they have various answers. But this Dream Center has a program called the Freedom Arts, and what it does is it teaches kids a lot of different skills. And so I added my classes to that, the self-defense class for the kids. Well, some of these kids had been bullied pretty bad, and so I took them through the program, and the director of it said, that really works. Not only did the kids, their confidence and self-esteem pick up, but their grades picked up. The issue of respect. He goes, you're the only program in our program, or our system, that these kids actually, they talk about you when you're not even here in a respectful way, and then some of the other teachers, they don't. I said, well, that's part of the training. That's the benefit of the martial arts, is that you really, and I even tell the kids, you don't respect me, I'm not teaching you. And they look at you like, and one kid goes, what do you mean? I said, do what I tell you, you're leaving.
It's pretty cut and dry right there.
Well, but you're straightforward with them. I'm not playing games with you.
Yeah.
And so I said, I would like to have you here, but we have rules, and these same rules I'm expecting you to follow, I have for a long time. And they look at you, and they start to realize that this guy is for real, and it carries over with them, and that's great. It's great to see that happen.
Yeah.
So I enjoy that. And with the adult class, I'm teaching the Hungar. I start that as my entry level system because it's a lot easier for people to learn, especially if you're older, And then we move on to the Kung Tao, and things really get interesting when you go there. But it's fun, and I enjoy it. So, and I like to see people, where they're really getting helped, and I always ask them when they come in. I said, I need you to write me like a 1-page paragraph why you're here, and what you expect, And then 6 months later, we write that again, and you'd be surprised at how the answers change or their reason changes, because they grow a little bit. 6 months isn't really a long period of time, but if they have committed themselves to it, you'll see that.
Yeah. And
some of them who write really short explanations of why they want to be there, they usually don't last. So I already get a heads up when they write me that. I read that and I look at it and I watch them, and they'll either stick around or they won't.
Plus, how often do you guys train? Like with that? Do you do that for the kids and the adults, or just the adults?
Both.
Okay.
Well, the kids, I don't have them fill that out. I have their parents.
Okay.
Because I want the parents to know, why did you bring them here? Because a lot of times they don't have any discipline or they're not respecting me. And then I have a little talk with the parent. And I said, look, I can help you with that, but you got to understand something. The reason they don't respect you is because you're not demanding that. Well, yeah, I do. I said, no, you don't. How many times do you let them out of it? Because you're feeling sorry for them, or you think they're going to hate you. I said, I tell my students, the kids, I said, you might think I'm mean, and you might not like me for a while, but later you're going to thank me. And they look at me and they go, some of them have no idea, but if you listen to Ed, he used to hate some of the stuff that he was having to do, but I knew what it was going to build in him. He didn't until now. He looks at it and he's going, man, I'm glad I did that now. I said, yeah. I said, but you didn't like me for a lot of times.
Yeah, because when we talked a couple months ago, he goes, yeah, man, I just remember being there and I hated it so much. But now, I see why he did that, and he's got the full picture now.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so it's it's good now. He's passing that on. Same thing, So that's really good, and you see it works, and I just look forward to continuing on. Kung Fu is something you can do, especially the softer side of it. You can do it until you can't move. You can do it. A lot of Chinese practitioners in China, they're 100 years old, still practicing their forms. still doing it like they did when they were in their 20s. Actually, probably better.
It's maybe a smidge,
Yeah, because a lot of Kung Fu, learning to, it is something that your body is constantly, as you get older, your body's changing. And so you have to adjust, you know. But because of the nature of like the Tai Chi, for instance, it has these soft fluid movements. They're very deceptive as far as people look at that and think you can't do anything. But most of them have never heard of short power. They've never heard of soft power, because those two words don't seem to go together, but they do. You know, especially in the way the Chinese have developed their art. And it really does take a lifetime to really learn it. Probably the hardest thing is learning yourself.
Yeah.
I'm talking about who you are, what you are, and why you are. And Kung Fu has some answers for those things, in my opinion.
So hey, this is the part of the show where I usually say where I'm headed to, but I've got nothing coming up in the near future. If you want to advertise your event here, shoot me an email at adam.bockler@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed this show. As always, be sure to subscribe on iTunes or via RSS at adambockler.com. And hey, like the Martial Arts Podcast on Facebook while you're at it. Thanks to Mr. Dexter Parker for being on this month. Thanks to BJ Aberly on the music. And thank you for listening to me, Adam Bockler, on the Martial Arts Podcast.